I've tested more lenses than I can count over the years, so today I'm sharing my absolute favorite portrait lenses for Sony E-mount along with their best budget alternatives and showing you the real world results. I have a mixture of both primes and zooms to share. My first favorite portrait lens for Sony is, of course, the classic 85mm f1.4 GM2. If you're looking for that ultimate high-end look to your portraits, this is the lens that really delivers. Even wide open at f1.4, this lens produces incredibly sharp images with beautiful subject separation. The bokeh is stunning, it's super clean and smooth. You can see in these portraits I've taken with it just how nice and creamy the background can get. I've been a long-time user of the GM1 version of this lens, but I did end up upgrading to the Mark II, mostly for the ergonomics because they are both very sharp. I do like that it's nearly 200 grams lighter, which does save you some back pain when it's in your camera bag on long days of shooting. An 85mm is a must-have prime for a portrait photographer because of the compression and the way you're able to capture stunning headshots. But if the GM2 is out of your budget, then I found the perfect budget alternative lens, which is the Viltrox 85mm f1.4 Pro. For a much cheaper cost, it delivers stunningly sharp images that rival the GM2 in some lighting conditions. This lens also has really beautiful subject separation with that dreamy, creamy background and nice bokeh. It is unfortunately on the heavier side though at 800 grams. I find this lens has a lot of personality when it comes to the lens flare because it creates super hazy flares that are great if you're like me and like capturing dreamy backlit portraits. Where the downsides lie in this more budget alternative to the GM is where a lot of these more affordable options fall a bit short, and that is in performance. The GM2 doesn't skip a beat with autofocus, whereas with this Viltrox, I did have a few more missed focus photos. I have a direct comparison between the Viltrox and GM2, which I'll leave linked down below if you're interested in seeing more side-by-side examples, but overall, this lens really punches way above its price point. Next up is a lens that actually took a little while for me to come around to upgrading to, but now that I have it, I absolutely love it, and it's the Sony 50mm f1.2 GM. There's a couple of reasons it took me a minute to get this lens. Firstly, I already had the Zeiss 50mm f1.4 at the time, which is a fantastic lens, so I didn't feel like I needed to replace it yet. And secondly, I wasn't even reaching for my 50 that often anyway, as I was at the time very obsessed with my 35 and 85mm combination. But as the years went by, my need for a 50 grew more and more until I found myself using it very regularly again, so I decided to upgrade to this f1.2 because as a person who loves bokeh and a shallow depth of field, I needed to own Sony's only f1.2 lens. As you can see from these photos, this lens helps me produce the most gorgeous images, and I absolutely love that round lens flare. By the way, if you want to learn how to take photos with natural light the way I do, I have an online workshop with brand new, never seen before footage where I teach you everything I know about getting the best results with natural light and no other equipment is needed. I'll leave a link down below for you. So yet again, if you want this 50mm look but you don't want to spend those GM prices, this next lens is an absolute classic, the Zeiss 55mm f1.8. I really love this lens because it's small, lightweight, and has so much character. For the price, the images you can get out of this lens are so beautiful with a nice amount of sharpness, contrast, and pleasing bokeh. Now, it isn't completely perfect because it does have a couple of quirks like some chromatic aberration and pretty strong lens flares when you're shooting backlit, which can be both good and bad. While I love a nice lens flare for creative shots, if I'm using this lens for more professional work, I want to make sure the flare is going to enhance my photo and not cover up important parts of it like it has in some of these shots. Since this shoot in particular was a creative portrait session, I wasn't using a lens hood and I did choose to edit some of these photos because they are quite fun. But anyway, I love this lens so much and I think it's a legendary budget-friendly 50mm option. My third and final prime lens before we move on to zooms is my most favorite one of them all, the 35mm f1.4 GM. And this one has the most similar budget-friendly alternative out of them all. But let's talk about the GM first. This lens practically lives on my camera body for portrait sessions, weddings, and when I travel too. I just uploaded 2 vlogs from my time in Iceland, which you should watch if you haven't seen them yet, and I used my 35mm so often while I was there. One of the reasons it's so easy to use all the time is that it's 524 grams, so it's pretty lightweight for a high-end lens. The image quality is stunningly sharp and the autofocus is incredibly sticky and reliable. One thing I don't like about it is that in some backlit situations, it does get a bit of an undesirable lens flare, and if you use it for video, it has heavy focus breathing, but aside from that, this is easily my favorite lens for Sony. If the price tag feels a bit out of reach, you can get almost identical image quality for a fraction of the cost with the Sigma 35mm f1.4 DGDN Art. Like I said in my comparison video between these two lenses, the results from this Sigma are so impressive that during editing, it is genuinely hard to tell its files apart from the GM. The Sigma renders images with a slightly warmer tone and a bit more punchy contrast as it cuts through backlight a touch better than the GM, which helps your subject pop really nicely. It is a bit heavier at 640 grams, and the autofocus isn't quite as hyper responsive as the GM for high-speed shooting, but for a standard portrait session, it feels perfectly reliable. Sigma have also released a Mark II of this 35, which I haven't had the chance to test yet. If I do, I will definitely make a video about it, so all this is about the Mark I, which I have tested. While I love primes, I know not everyone feels the same way, so I also have some of my favorite zoom lenses for Sony that I want to go through. First, we have the Sony 28-70mm f2 GM. This f2 zoom is definitely a premium investment, but it is for a very good reason. It is shockingly light for an f2 zoom at 918 grams, which is half a kilo lighter than Canon's equivalent of this lens. The image quality is stunning as well. It's very sharp, but has a nice balance where it doesn't look overly harsh or clinical, especially with skin texture like some f.8 zoom lenses tend to do. Even though it's a zoom lens, thanks to its f2 aperture, you're able to capture very dreamy pictures with a shallow depth of field, which normally you would switch over to a prime to do. But since this is a standard zoom lens, it could easily replace an entire bag of primes for a wedding or portrait photographer who needs versatility without wanting to sacrifice character. For this one, I have two more affordable options than this GM. The first one is the Sony 24-50mm f2.8. Now, with this lens, you are getting that little bit wider on the long end since it starts at 24 rather than 28 like the f2, but you are significantly shorter on the long end since this one only reaches 50mm compared to 70. However, I really enjoyed my time using this lens and I find it produces very pleasing looking photos. It has sharp images with lots of clarity, has a good handle on chromatic aberration, and has nice looking bokeh and overall character. It does have some distortion on the wide end, but aside from that, it's a pretty impressive G lens. The second alternative is the Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 G2. This one starts at the same focal length as the GM, and you're getting 5 extra millimeters on the long end at 75mm compared to 70. This Tamron is also a small and lightweight standard zoom lens option, making it such a good all-rounder to leave on your camera body. The image quality is great as well, as you can see from these photo samples I took. While I personally don't have a standard zoom lens in my bag, this next zoom is one of my favorites and most used lenses in my kit, and that's the Sony 70-200mm f2.8 GM2. I was a dedicated prime lens shooter until I got my hands on the review unit of this lens, and I just fell in love with it and had to buy one for myself when it eventually came out. While I do use this lens more often for travel than I do portraits, it is a really fantastic lens option for portrait and wedding photographers because of its reach and versatility in being a zoom. This lens is my replacement for the 135mm, which you might have noticed is not on my list today as a favorite portrait lens. While I do love the results a 135 produces, for me, it's too cumbersome to use regularly, so it unfortunately doesn't make the cut. Aside from the razor-sharp image quality of the 70-200, the beautiful smooth, clean bokeh, and the ultra-fast focusing, what really sold me on this lens was the size and weight. It's actually quite a small 70-200 and weighs just over 1 kilo, so that means it's 435 grams lighter than the Mark I version. This lens truly is a joy to travel and shoot with. I love, love, love it. You might be thinking that as a portrait photographer, I would suggest the Sony 50-150 f2 lens. However, this one is a harder sell for me personally compared to the 28-70 f2. The 50-150 is about 340 grams heavier than the 70-200, and it's also not compatible with Sony's teleconverters, which I use a lot with my 70-200. So for me, I'm happy to stick with this lens instead. In terms of an alternative for a telephoto zoom, I also really love the Tamron 70-180mm f2.8 G2. You miss out on a bit of reach on the long end, but this lens weighs only 855 grams, which is quite impressive. It captures extremely clear and sharp images that look so good. Straight out of camera, the files lean into a slightly warm color cast that is flattering for portraits, and the bokeh is nice and clean too. While not perfectly round all the way through, it still looks great in the background. Again, I have a dedicated review for this lens that I'll leave linked down below, along with any other lenses that I mentioned in today's video. If you're interested in hearing more about them and seeing more images, let me know what your favorite lens to shoot with is in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!